So here we are. We've arrived at the final part of this three-part journey, this series on subliminal personal development, how it works, what it does, and why it matters. Now, in part one, we looked at how it works and the science behind the evolution of the conscious and the subconscious mind. In part two, we took a deep dive into this dark cavern we call our skull to find out what goes on there as we learn about how the world works and how we work in it. Now that took us to the incredible place that neuroscientists and psychologists call our model of the world. And as promised, in this final part, we're going to explore that world and the building blocks that make it up to give you a better understanding of why it works the way it does. And that matters because by understanding why it works that way, makes it possible for you to literally predict into being the kind of life you'd love to live. But more of that later. At the end of the last video, we'd begun to realise that the world that we think we experience isn't always what it seems, and that the seemingly self-evident reality of our conscious world is actually a reality that we create for ourselves at a subconscious level. Remember this image? Well, I'm going to guess that the answer to the question, which square is darker, A or B, still seems self-evidently obvious. But, as we discovered, the world we experience is determined not by the supposedly finite material world out there, but by a factor of 6 or 7 to 1 by what's already in here as a result of previous experiences. So what this means is that in every moment of every day, we are predicting our world into being. See, now also, in part 2, I shared how on previous journeys to this incredible place, I discovered what neuroscientists and psychologists call concepts, and that these concepts are the building blocks of our model of the world. They are what make our world experience our own personal world experience. So what are concepts? Why did they evolve, and what are they used for? Well, we've already discovered that the subconscious mind, with its incredible 11 million bits per second processor, doesn't think, it files. It leaves the creativity and the agility to the conscious mind so that it can get on with the job of organising, assimilating and codifying the world as we experience it. Well, concepts, they're its filing system. Now, when I started to really understand what concepts are and how they create our own personal model of the world for us, I started to understand what neuroscientists mean when they talk about our experience of life and living as a controlled hallucination. And as a result, I was able to start taking more conscious control of that flow of hallucinating reality, and things began to turn out how I wanted them to turn out. So there's a lot to play for here. And my intention is that in this third part of the trilogy, you get to begin your own journey toward that liberating understanding. So let's use this image to explain the concept of concept. It's absolutely full of them, and it's because of them that A seems darker than B, even though it isn't, and even though you probably still don't believe me. Now, as I said, the key that unlocks this seeming paradox is to really understand what we mean when we talk about concepts. So let me give you my take. A concept is a collection of elements and ingredients that come together to represent a definable idea. A tree is a concept. I just say the word and all of the elements and the ingredients that make a tree are instantly collected together for you in your subconscious mind. Once you have a concept, it works like a label or a belief. It becomes for you something else that defines another bit of how the world works. Put simply, it's just a really efficient and effective shorthand. So how are concepts at play in this image, and how are they changing the reality as we think we perceive it? Well, the cylinder block you can see, well, that's a concept. A concept made up of things like circular, and solid and non-transparent, a combination of which, in this case, is causing a shadow, which is also a concept made up of light, the absence of light, and the effect that it has on the colour on the surface on which it falls. And the checkerboard on which the shadow's falling, that's also a concept made up of ideas like squares and predictable patterns of different colours. And so it goes on. Think about it for a second and you start to realise that the world we experience is made up of millions of concepts. And this image is no different. It's full of them. Letters, patterns, cylinder, shadow, checkerboard, words. Yeah, even the words that I'm using to describe concept are concepts. Words bring together definable ideas by giving those ideas easy labels for us to use, like a tree. And by using them, we make our communication with each other so much more efficient and effective. Just think about how much more effort it takes just to order the food the way you want it on holiday when you're in a restaurant where neither you nor the waiter speak the same language. Concepts, like understanding the same words for medium rare steak, make life so much easier. And it's this drive for efficiency and effectiveness that had our subconscious mind evolve this filing system of concepts. Plus, it makes it much easier to get the steak the way you want it. Now, the great thing about this image is that it shows us how these subconscious concepts have a far greater influence on what we experience than our conscious mind does. Because even though A looks darker than B, and it's impossible to make them look the same even though you know they are, the supposed reality that you experience, the conscious reality, is that they're not. Because concepts like cylinder block, shadow, predictable patterns, they're all coming together to create this hallucination that A is darker than B. And by the way, the squares that make up the checkerboard, they're also a hallucination. They're actually diamonds. Now here's a lovely example of how the concepts that we have in our model of the world can create for us a reality that's got more to do with what we expect to happen than what's actually happening.
Again, this is the USS Montana requesting that you immediately divert your course 15 degrees to the north to avoid a collision. Over.
Please divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid collision.
This is Captain Hancock. You will divert your course. Over.
Negative, Captain. I'm not moving anything. Change your course. Over.
Sir, this is the USS Montana, the second largest vessel in the North Atlantic Fleet. You will change course 15 degrees north, or I will be forced to take measures to ensure the safety of this ship. Over.
This is a lighthouse, mate. It's your call. Hello, Captain? think he's gone. Fair enough.
The captain's model of the world, as he came up onto the bridge, was calibrated for one of these, when the reality was actually one of these. Had he been able to pre-calibrate his model of the world with the possibility of a lighthouse, then... Now, that expression, pre-calibrate, now that's something that I discovered on one of my many adventures poking around in my subconscious mind. Because it turns out that our model of the world is continually pre-calibrating itself to reflect where you are, what's going on, and what you expect. Fishing boat rather than lighthouse. Because by doing that, it becomes much more effective and much more efficient, most of the time, at offering up accurate concepts that match up with the sensory experience that we're having. So I got to thinking, can we proactively pre-calibrate our model of the world so that the concepts that it offers up focus on the outcomes that we want to create? And if so, will that pre-calibration enable us to understand and interpret the world as we experience it in ways that guide us toward the kind of life we would love to live? And I found out you can. And it does. Let me show you what that looks like in action. Have a look at this image. What is it? What do you see? Can you make out what it is? And as you try to do that, I want you to notice something. I want you to notice how you're comparing this image to a whole range of different possible images that you're calling up out of your model of the world. And you're asking yourself, what concept is this image on the screen most like? Now that is what usually happens so quickly in your subconscious mind that you're not even aware that it's happening. Now though, you are, because I've drawn your attention to it, and because you can't find a matching concept. So what if I were to continue this thought experiment by pre-calibrating your model of the world with a concept that will enable you to interpret and understand what you're looking at? Ah, it makes sense now, because now you've got a concept that you can understand. And with this pre-calibration in place, you can now make sense of what were, just a few moments ago, meaningless blobs. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because we can use it. We can use it to help ourselves and each other move toward the kind of life and the kind of societies and the kind of world we would all love to live in. It matters because the world that we experience is the world that we predict into being, and all of those predictions are the ones that we are responsible for creating. You are the gatekeeper of your subconscious model of the world, and as soon as you get that, you get to create the door policy. So ask yourself now, what would your door policy be? Which concepts would you encourage to come in, and which ones would you bar for life? And what difference would doing that make? So this is where the real work of learning and development and growth, of creating the life you'd love to live, actually takes place in this incredible 11 million bit per second processor that builds our model of the world. And knowing this makes it seem all the more crazy that we try to get our 40 bit per second processor of the conscious mind to do all of the work. So, there you have it. Subliminal personal development. It stimulates your conscious mind and uses its creativity and its agility to open up your subconscious mind so that you get the chance to populate your model of the world with the kind of empowering and liberating concepts that will create for you your version of a life well lived. So thank you for taking the time to watch this 3-part series on subliminal personal development. My intention is that the Lab of Life app and the thought experiments that you conduct using it become your own personal instruction manual and guidebook for the kind of life you would love to live. But remember, don't work at it